The thing about galactic superiority complexes, Delia Kovac decided, was that they were deeply, profoundly boring. And as you can observe from the holographic data matrix, Instructor Kelvoth droned, his mandibles clicking with self-satisfaction. The Class 7 ion storm represents a complete atmospheric breakdown at the molecular level. Mortality rate, 100%. Survival time for carbon-based organisms, approximately 4.3 seconds. Survival time for silicon-based organisms, 6.7 seconds. Survival time for methane breathers. Still 100% dead though, right? Delia muttered, not quite under her breath. Kelvoth's compound eyes swiveled toward her with the kind of slow, deliberate malice that probably looked terrifying to other species. To Delia, who'd once stared down an EF5 tornado in a Walmart parking lot, it looked like a grasshopper having a bad day. The human has a question? The way he said human sounded like he was identifying a particularly disappointing species of mold. Not really a question. More of an observation that dead is dead, regardless of how many decimal points you put after it. Delia leaned back in her chair, specifically designed for the Vrex species, and thus about 2 sizes too small, and crossed her arms. I'm just saying, your PowerPoint presentation could use some editing. The other 17 students in the Galactic Storm Response Academy's introductory course made various sounds of alarm. The Vrex twins, Tick and Talk, not their real names but Delia couldn't pronounce the ultrasonic frequencies, actually gasped. The methane breather in the back, Plix, who looked like a sentient blob of grape jelly, burbled anxiously. PowerPoint? Kelvoth repeated slowly. Presentation. Lecture. Whatever you call this. Delia gestured at the holographic display showing various gruesome ways that storm systems could disassemble living beings at the atomic level. Back on Earth, we had this thing called the death by slides phenomenon. This is that, but with more tentacles. Your species has only been spacefaring for 73 of your solar cycles, Kelvoth said, his voice dropping to what was probably meant to be menacing but came across as constipated. The Harmonious Assembly has been studying atmospheric phenomena for 12,000 cycles. Perhaps you might consider learning rather than critiquing. Delia had heard variations of this speech approximately 47 times since arriving at the Academy 3 weeks ago. Humans were new. Humans were primitive. Humans had only just figured out faster-than-light travel by accidentally stumbling onto Alcubierre physics while trying to make a better microwave. That last part was actually true, and Delia found it hilarious that the galaxy was still salty about it. Sure thing, Professor Bug. She gave him a thumbs up, which caused another ripple of shock through the classroom. Apparently, extending your opposable thumb was considered profoundly rude in 17 different cultures. Delia had stopped keeping track after the first week. Kelvoth's antennae quivered. You will address me as Instructor Kelvoth, Junior Atmospheric Surveyor of the 3rd Tier Response Unit, Herald of the Stormwatch, blessed by the calm eye, survivor of... Yeah, I'm gonna stick with Professor Bug. The holographic display flickered as Kelvoth apparently struggled with the concept of insubordination. In the Harmonious Assembly, everyone had their place, their title, their designated role in the grand social hierarchy. The idea that someone might just not care seemed to physically pain him. Regardless, he finally continued, we shall proceed with the lesson. Class 7 ion storms are characterized by electrical discharges in the range of... The alarm cut through his lecture like a chainsaw through butter. Not the polite attention please chime that signaled class breaks. Not the gentle, there's a minor situation beep that meant someone had miscalibrated the atmospheric processors again. This was the full-throated, panic-inducing wail that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. Every alien in the room moved simultaneously. Tick and Talk were out the door before Delia could blink. Plix somehow compressed themselves into a blob roughly the size of a basketball and rolled toward the exit at impressive speed. Even Kelvoth, for all his pontificating, was suddenly very interested in being somewhere else. Class dismissed, he shouted, already halfway down the corridor. Emergency Protocol 7. All personnel to designated shelters. This is not a drill. Delia stood up slowly, watching the stampede of terrified aliens flowing past her like a river around a rock. She made her way to the nearest terminal and pulled up the alert. Class 7 ion storm detected distance, 47 kilometers and closing estimated time to station. Impact, 18 minutes. Survival probability, 0.00%. All personnel evacuate to emergency bunkers immediately. Huh, Delia said aloud to the empty classroom. 18 minutes. That's almost considerate. She pulled out her personal datapad, a human device that the Academy's quartermaster had looked at like it might explode, and checked the sensor readings. Wind speeds, electrical discharge patterns, barometric pressure, or the space equivalent thereof, temperature gradients. "Oh, you beautiful beast," she murmured, watching the data scroll past. This wasn't just a storm. This was a storm. The kind of atmospheric chaos that made every instinct in her Oklahoma-born heart sit up and pay attention. The kind she'd spent 15 years of her life studying, chasing, and occasionally running away from in a beat-up Ford pickup while laughing like a maniac. The emergency klaxon was still wailing when Delia made her way back to her quarters. She had exactly 12 minutes before impact, which was plenty of time. She grabbed her go-bag, the one she'd packed on day one, despite the Academy's assurance that emergency equipment will be provided in crisis situations, and did a quick inventory. Portable anemometer, modified for space. Check. Atmospheric sensor suite, cobbled together from Earth tech and some extremely confused alien components. Check. Her good boots. Check. Emergency rations, beef jerky because the Academy's protein paste tasted like despair. Check. Her grandfather's old storm-chasing jacket, worn leather and probably useless in space but comforting anyway. Check. "Attention all personnel," a mechanical voice announced over the intercom. "This is your final warning. Class 7 ion storm will impact station in 9 minutes. All personnel must be in designated shelters. Failure to comply will result in..." Delia tuned it out. She'd heard enough doom and gloom predictions to last a lifetime. The thing about storms was that they were dangerous, sure, but they followed rules. Physics. Patterns. If you understood the patterns, you could work with them. Or in this case, walk into them. The corridor to the outer observation deck was completely deserted. Emergency lights flashed red, painting everything in an aggressive crimson glow that probably worked great for creating panic, but was hell on her eyes. Delia made her way through 3 security doors, all standing wide open in the evacuation, and finally reached the deck. Through the reinforced transparent aluminum viewport, she could see it. The storm was beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. A swirling mass of purple and electric blue, shot through with lightning that arced in patterns she'd never seen before. It moved like a living thing, tendrils of ionized particles reaching out and pulling back, tasting the vacuum, searching for something to break. The station's outer hull was already being pelted by the leading edge. Delia watched a maintenance drone get caught in a tendril of electricity. It disintegrated. Just stopped being a drone and started being component atoms scattered across space. "Fascinating," she said, pulling out her sensor suite and starting to calibrate. The decay pattern is completely nonlinear, and that rotation rate. Behind her, a security camera tracked her movements silently. In the emergency command bunker, 3 levels down and encased in enough shielding to survive a direct nuclear blast, Instructor Kelvoth stared at the monitor in absolute horror. "Why is the human still on the observation deck?" he demanded. Commander Brightwind after Rain, a avian species who looked like someone had crossed an eagle with a very stressed-out accountant, ruffled their feathers anxiously. "We assumed she had evacuated with everyone else." "Well, she clearly hasn't." Kelvoth's mandibles clacked together so hard they made a sound like castanets. "Someone needs to..." He stopped. Because on the monitor, Delia Kovac wasn't just standing on the observation deck anymore. She was putting on her jacket, checking her equipment, and walking toward the airlock. "No," Kelvoth whispered. "No, she can't be. She wouldn't. Even a human can't be that stupid." They watched in collective silence as Delia punched in the override code for the airlock. Where had she even gotten that code? The outer door began to cycle open. "Someone stop her!" Kelvoth shrieked, his composure finally shattering completely. "Lock down the airlock. Override the override. She doesn't understand what she's doing." "Airlock controls are non-responsive," one of the technicians reported, their voice barely a whisper. She's disabled the safety protocols." On the screen, Delia sealed her environment suit, a bulky human design that looked absurdly primitive next to the sleek Academy-issue suits, and stepped into the airlock chamber. She gave the camera a little wave. Then she tapped the external release. The outer door opened, and Delia Kovac stepped out into a Class 7 ion storm, the kind of atmospheric nightmare that had a 100% mortality rate for every species in the known galaxy. She checked her wrist-mounted sensor display, looked up at the roiling chaos of electricity and ionized death, and started walking directly into it. "The primitive doesn't understand." Kelvoth's voice was almost a wail now. "She's committing suicide. Someone get a recovery team ready. We'll need to collect whatever's left for her species' burial rites. This is a disaster. The first human in the Academy program, and she walks into certain death in her 3rd week. The diplomatic incident alone will—" He stopped. Because on the monitor, approximately 30 seconds after entering the storm that should have disintegrated her instantly, Delia Kovac was still there, still walking, still alive. And unless Kelvoth was very much mistaken, she was taking notes. The thing about not dying when everyone expects you to die is that it really ruins their whole day. Delia had been inside the storm for 43 minutes when she finally decided she had enough data. The ion patterns were fascinating, not entirely dissimilar to the electrical dynamics of a supercell thunderstorm, just scaled up by a factor of about 1,000 and happening in vacuum instead of atmosphere. She'd managed to collect readings from 17 different positions within the storm structure, and her modified equipment was holding up beautifully. Well, mostly beautifully. The anemometer had melted around the 20-minute mark, but that was fine. She had backups. "Okay, gorgeous. I've got what I need," she muttered to the storm, watching another spectacular discharge of purple lightning arc past her position. "Thanks for not killing me. Appreciate it." The walk back to the airlock took another 10 minutes. The storm was starting to dissipate now, its energy spreading out as it passed the station. Delia made a few final notes about its decay rate, surprisingly fast actually, and cycled through the airlock. The inner door opened. Every single member of the Academy's faculty was standing there, staring at her like she'd just risen from the dead. Which, from their perspective, she supposed she had. "Hi," Delia said, pulling off her helmet. Her hair was doing that static electricity thing where it stood straight up, which was unfortunate but unavoidable. "Is there a decontamination protocol I'm supposed to follow, or—" Instructor Kelvoth made a sound that Delia's translator couldn't quite process. It came out as something between a wheeze and the noise a computer makes when it's trying to divide by 0. Commander Brightwind After Rain stepped forward, their feathers still completely puffed out in what Delia had learned was the avian equivalent of extreme stress. "You're alive." "Yeah, that tracks." Delia started peeling off the environment suit. "Listen, I know I probably broke about 15 safety protocols, but in my defense, nobody specifically told me not to walk into the storm. Your orientation manual is really unclear about— How are you alive?" Kelvoth finally managed to articulate, his mandibles clicking so rapidly they sounded like a machine gun. Delia blinked. "I wore a suit? The suit is irrelevant. The storm should have the electrical discharge alone. The ionic radiation would—" He seemed to be physically struggling with the existence of her continued survival. 43 minutes! You were in a Class 7 ion storm for 43 minutes! 46, actually. Took me a few minutes to walk back. Delia held up her datapad. "And I got some great readings. The storm's internal structure is way more organized than your literature suggests. There's almost a coherent pattern to the—" "She's a god," whispered one of the technicians, a crystalline being whose name Delia could never remember. "She's a war machine," countered another. The humans must have military-grade enhancement technology they haven't declared. She's too stupid to die, Kelvoth said flatly. That's the only explanation. Her species hasn't evolved proper survival instincts yet. Delia felt her eye twitch. Okay, first of all, rude. Second of all, it wasn't that dangerous once you understood the patterns. The storm has a rhythm, right? The electrical discharges follow the ionic density gradients, which means if you track the Kelvoth's voice hit a pitch that Delia's translator rendered as a tea kettle screaming. Nothing tracks in a Class 7 storm. It's chaos. It's death. It's weather, Delia interrupted. Complicated weather, sure, but weather. Back on Earth, I've been in storms that I need to document this. Plix had somehow materialized next to her, which was impressive for a being that had to roll everywhere. Their gelatinous form was quivering with what Delia had learned to recognize as excitement. Human demonstrates impossible survival capacity. Previous theories about carbon-based fragility require complete revision. This will revolutionize our understanding of— I'm just going to go file my data, Delia said, backing away slowly. And maybe get something to eat. Does anyone know if the cafeteria is— Nobody move! Commander Bright's voice cut through the chaos. They ruffled their feathers back into a semblance of order and fixed Delia with a stare that was probably meant to be authoritative. Cadet Kovac, you will report to my office immediately for debriefing. The rest of you, return to your stations. We will discuss this incident through proper channels. Does this mean I'm in trouble? Delia asked. That, Commander Bright said slowly, depends entirely on how you define trouble. The debriefing lasted 6 hours. Then there was another debriefing with the Academy's Safety Council, which lasted 4 hours. Then there was a third debriefing with representatives from the Galactic Atmospheric Research Consortium, which somehow lasted 8 hours, and included what Delia was pretty sure was an accusation of witchcraft. I'm not a witch, she said for the 17th time. I'm a meteorologist. And what? Asked High Scholar Tremnox, a being that looked like someone had given a tree trunk too much anxiety medication. Is the difference? One uses science. The other uses, also science, historically, but with worse methodology. By the end of week 1 post-storm, Plix had published 3 papers with titles like Human Imperviousness to Certain Death, a Preliminary Study, and Reconsidering Carbon-Based Fragility in Light of Impossible Survival Data. By the end of week 2, the galactic academic community had fractured into roughly 7 different camps about what Delia's survival meant. The most popular theories were: humans were secretly cyborgs, humans were gods in disguise, humans were too primitive to understand when they should be dead, Earth had military weather adaptation technology they were hiding. The storm hadn't actually been that dangerous. This theory was quickly disproven when someone checked the sensor logs and found that yes, it had absolutely been that dangerous. Delia specifically was an outlier and shouldn't be counted. The universe had glitched. Delia's personal favorite was theory number 7. The diplomatic incident came in week 3. The Galactic Council, Commander Bright said, their voice exhausted, has formally requested that Earth provide detailed technical specifications for its atmospheric adaptation military technology. Delia looked up from her lunch. Actual Earth food that her family had shipped at enormous expense, because she'd rather eat ramen than the Academy's protein paste one more time. Our what now? They believe your survival indicates advanced military technology. They're concerned about the strategic implications. The strategic implications of walking into a storm? The strategic implications of surviving a storm that kills everything else. Commander Bright sat down across from her, which was unusual. Officers didn't typically fraternize with cadets. They want to know if humans can weaponize this ability. Delia put down her chopsticks. Commander, I'm going to say something, and I need you to really listen to it. I'm listening. I survived that storm because I'm from Oklahoma. There was a very long pause. I don't understand, Commander Bright said finally. Oklahoma. Tornado Alley. I grew up with storms that could level entire towns. I learned to read weather patterns before I learned algebra. I spent 15 years chasing tornadoes for research. She picked her chopsticks back up. Your Class 7 ion storm was impressive, don't get me wrong, but it's not the scariest thing I've ever walked into. But the others have never seen a real storm in their lives, Delia finished. Right? Your species evolved on a planet with stable weather. Most of the galaxy did. You've got climate control, perfect atmospheric regulation, the whole deal. Earth is a mess. We get hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, floods, droughts, and that's just Tuesday. We built our entire civilization in the middle of atmospheric chaos. Commander Bright's feathers had started doing that thing where they stood up involuntarily. You're saying your entire species is adapted to environmental chaos? Yeah, pretty much. Delia shrugged. We're not special. We're just used to it. The commander opened their beak, closed it, opened it again. This is going to cause problems. Why? Before Commander Bright could answer, the emergency alert system activated again. Not the Class 7 alarm. Something worse. The holographic display materialized in the center of the cafeteria, showing a swirling mass of energy that made the previous storm look like a light drizzle. Class 9 ion storm. Detected location. Approaching Theta 7 moon colony. Population, 47 million. Estimated time to impact, 6 hours. Survival probability, 0.0%. Evacuation, impossible. The cafeteria went silent. Class 9, someone whispered. That's never been recorded before. It's theoretical, another voice added. The worst storm possible. Nothing survives Class 9. Nothing. Delia watched the data scroll past. Wind speeds that made the previous storm look calm. Electrical discharge patterns that would turn a ship into vapor. Temperature fluctuations that would freeze and boil simultaneously. 47 million people, Plix burbled quietly. All those lives. Commander Bright's communicator chimed. They listened for a moment, their expression becoming increasingly grim. Then they looked directly at Delia. The Galactic Council has issued an emergency order, they said slowly. They're requesting, no, they're ordering, that we send our atmospheric specialist to investigate the storm. Every eye in the cafeteria turned to Delia. They want you to walk into a Class 9 ion storm, Commander Bright continued. They believe if anyone can survive it and gather data that might help with evacuation. Strategies. It's you. Delia looked at the holographic display. At the storm that was worse than anything in the galaxy's recorded history. At the data that suggested this thing could probably crack a moon in half if it felt like it. She thought about 47 million people who were about to have a very bad day. She thought about her hazard pay statement from last month, which had been disappointingly identical to her regular pay. Okay, she said finally. But I want this in writing, and I want to know, do I get hazard pay for this? Commander Bright made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. The galactic news networks were calling it the final walk. Delia called it Tuesday with better lighting. Unprecedented act of heroism, the Vrelian news anchor was saying, their scales shimmering with what passed for somber respect among their species. The human, Delia Kovac, has volunteered to enter the Class 9 ion storm in what experts are calling a noble, but ultimately futile gesture. We go now to our correspondent on Theta 7 moon, where 47 million residents await their fate. Delia muted the broadcast and finished checking her equipment. She'd requisitioned some additional gear this time. More sensor packages, better insulation on her suit, and, most importantly, a case of emergency flares she'd pulled from the station's ancient supply closet. You don't have to do this, Commander Bright said quietly. They were standing in the hangar bay, watching Delia load equipment into the small shuttle that would take her to the storm's edge. Sure I do. It's in my contract now. Atmospheric specialist. Delia grinned. Besides, 47 million people is a lot of people, even if they are all convinced I'm about to die heroically. Aren't you? Commander, I'm from Oklahoma. We don't do heroic death. We do spite-based survival. The shuttle ride to the storm took 90 minutes. Delia spent the time reviewing the sensor data and muttering to herself about asymmetric rotation patterns. And that's not how ionic density should behave. The storm was enormous. The Class 7 she'd walked through before looked like a candle flame compared to this bonfire. This thing stretched across thousands of kilometers, a roiling mass of purple and electric blue, and something that her sensors kept insisting was impossible color frequency. It was also, Delia realized as she got closer, moving wrong. Storms followed patterns. They responded to pressure systems, temperature gradients, the rotation of planetary bodies. This one was doing all that, but there was something else underneath, something that looked almost like... "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Delia muttered, watching the data scroll past her screen. The storm was alive. Not metaphorically alive. Actually, legitimately, biologically alive. It had a nervous system, sort of. She could see electrical patterns that looked disturbingly like neural activity. It had something that might be sensory organs, distributed throughout its structure. It was processing information. It was lost. "Okay," Delia said aloud to her shuttle's empty cabin. "Okay. This is new. This is very new. This is..." She pulled up the historical data on Class 7 through Class 9 storms. The movement patterns, the seemingly random appearance and disappearance, the way they sometimes avoided certain areas and sometimes sought them out. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're not storms. You're animals." The shuttle's proximity alarm started screaming. She was at the edge of the storm now. Time to make a decision. Delia sealed her helmet, grabbed the case of flares, and opened the airlock. 3 billion beings across 17 different worlds were watching the live feed when Delia Kovac stepped into the Class 9 ion storm. The Galactic News Network had deployed every recording drone they could spare. This was, after all, going to be the most watched death in recent history. Might as well get good footage. Except Delia didn't die. She stood at the edge of the storm, lit up by electrical discharges that should have vaporized her, and she started doing something that nobody could quite understand. She was waving, not flailing or trying to shield herself, just waving, like she was trying to get something's attention. "What is she doing?" Kelvoth demanded from the Academy's observation center. "I have no idea," Commander Bright admitted. On the broadcast, Delia activated one of her flares. Bright red light bloomed in the darkness of space, a tiny spark against the storm's massive presence. The storm paused. Its rotation slowed. The electrical discharges decreased in frequency. Something that might have been attention focused on the small human with her small flare. Delia threw the flare away from the moon. It arced through space, trailing red light. The storm followed it. "She's leading it away," Plix burbled, their gelatinous form quivering with excitement. "She's actually guiding it. But how?" "She thinks it's alive," Commander Bright said suddenly. "Look at her movements. She's not treating it like a phenomenon. She's treating it like an animal." Delia activated another flare. Red light. Threw it further from the moon. The storm followed, its massive form shifting direction like a ship changing course. "This is impossible," the news anchor was saying. "The human appears to be... we're not sure how to describe this. She appears to be hurting the storm?" Another flare. Another course correction. Delia was moving systematically now, leading the storm away from Theta 7 moon in a wide arc. The electrical discharges that came near her were intense enough to light up her shields, but they weren't attacking. They were almost curious. "It's like herding an angry toddler made of lightning." Delia's voice crackled over the open channel. She'd apparently forgotten her mic was broadcasting to 3 billion people. "Come on, big guy, that's it. Away from the populated area. Good storm, nice storm. Yes, you can chase the pretty lights, just chase them over there." The storm followed. For 6 hours, Delia Kovac led a Class 9 ion storm away from a populated moon, using nothing but emergency flares and what appeared to be animal handling techniques. The galaxy watched in silence. Then, in awe. Then, in something approaching religious fervor. By the time she guided the storm into an empty sector of space and watched it dissipate, or possibly fall asleep, the data was unclear. 7 different religious movements had formed around her. The Church of the Stormwalker declared her a prophet. The unified consciousness of Vrel proclaimed her a manifestation of the divine. The Economics Guild immediately filed 17 patents on human storm whispering technology and atmospheric entity manipulation methods. Delia, exhausted and running on spite and the last of her beef jerky, just wanted to go back to her bunk. "Brilliant work, Cadet Kovac," Commander Bright said when she finally made it back to the station. "Absolutely brilliant. You saved 47 million lives." "Thanks. Can I sleep now?" "In a moment. There's been a development." Something in the commander's tone made Delia's spine straighten. "What kind of development?" Commander Bright pulled up a holographic display. 17 red dots appeared on the star map. 17 massive energy signatures. 17 more Class 9 storms appearing across the galaxy simultaneously. "They appeared 20 minutes ago," Commander Bright said quietly. "All at once. All moving in the same direction." Delia watched the trajectory lines. Watched where they converged. Earth. "Oh," she said quietly. "Oh no." "The Galactic Council is in emergency session," Commander Bright continued. "They're trying to understand what this means, why the storms would all—" They stopped. "Cadet Kovac, why are you smiling?" "I'm not smiling. This is I figured out something the galaxy is going to hate face." Delia pulled up the data from the Class 9 storm she'd just guided away, pulled up the life signs, the behavioral patterns. "Commander, you know what baby animals do when they're lost?" What?" "They go home." Delia pointed at the convergence point. "They're not attacking Earth. They're not invading. They're going home." The commander's feathers started standing up again. "Home? You're saying—" "Those aren't storms," Delia said, her voice tired but somehow amused. "They're babies. Lost babies. And we've been living with their parents for about 4 billion years." In the Galactic Command Center, somebody started screaming. It was probably Kelvoth. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was, in Delia's professional opinion, the most dramatic overreaction she'd witnessed since her aunt found out about her nephew's tattoo. 17 unstoppable storms converging on a primitive world. The counselor from Vrel was shouting, their scales flushed, deep purple with agitation. "This is an extinction-level event. We must evacuate the human homeworld immediately." "We can't evacuate 8 billion people in 3 days," someone else pointed out. "Then we must accept the tragic loss of the human species." "Or," Delia said from her seat in the corner, where she'd been placed as expert witness and had been promptly ignored for the last 40 minutes, "you could just calm down." The chamber went silent. Approximately 300 alien dignitaries turned to stare at her. "Excuse me?" the High Chancellor said slowly. "Did you just tell the Galactic Council to calm down about an extinction-level event targeting your homeworld?" "Yeah, because it's not an extinction-level event. It's Wednesday." Delia stood up, pulling out her datapad. "Look, I know this seems scary to you guys, but we've literally been living with this our entire existence as a species." She pulled up a holographic display of Earth's atmosphere. "This is Hurricane Katrina. Class 9 storm beast, juvenile, approximately 3 days old. This is the tri-state tornado of 1925. Class 7, maybe 8 hours old. This is Typhoon Haiyan. Class 9, aggressive temperament, but tracked and predicted by meteorologists 3 days before landfall." The council stared at the images. "You're saying," the High Chancellor said slowly, "that your species has been living with Class 7 through Class 9 storm beasts as a regular atmospheric phenomenon? We call them weather. This is the National Weather Service. We've had it since 1870. We track storm beasts across the entire planet. We predict where they'll go. We name them alphabetically. We broadcast warnings. We've built our entire civilization around the fact that sometimes the sky tries to kill us." "But how do you survive?" someone whispered. "Basements, mostly. Also weather radar, and a healthy sense of when to get the hell out of the way." Delia shrugged. "Sometimes storms win. We've lost people, but we adapt. We rebuild." "Your species is insane," Kelvoth muttered from somewhere in the chamber. "Our species is adaptable," Delia corrected. "Now, About these 17 storm beasts heading home. They're going to land, dissipate back into normal atmospheric patterns, and Earth's weather will be weird for a few weeks. We'll issue warnings. People will stock up on supplies. It'll be fine. You're certain? The High Chancellor asked. I mean, I'm like 70% certain, which for meteorology is practically a guarantee. The council exchanged glances. Then they made it her problem. 6 months later, Delia was director of the newly formed Galactic Weather Service, a position she had neither wanted nor requested. I just wanted to study storms, she complained to Commander Bright over what the station called coffee, but tasted like regret. Now I'm running a department with a budget of 3 trillion credits and 200 terrified aliens who think I'm either a goddess or a very convincing liar. You're doing excellent work, Commander Bright said diplomatically. I'm doing paperwork. Do you know how many forms I had to fill out for weather balloons? I had to file them under potential defensive systems. The 17 storm beasts had returned to Earth, where they'd been welcomed by Earth's existing storm systems like long-lost relatives. The planet's weather had been spectacular for 3 weeks. Then everything settled back into normal patterns. Earth's meteorologists, when informed they'd been tracking living creatures instead of atmospheric phenomena, had shrugged and continued doing their jobs. A few adjustments to their models, some new terminology, and they were back to issuing forecasts within a week. The rest of the galaxy had completely lost its collective mind. We have another request, Commander Bright said. The Zenthari system is experiencing unusual atmospheric disturbances. They're requesting human consultation. Tell them to check if their industrial emissions are disrupting storm beast migration patterns. Send them the handbook. Chapter 7. And the Economics Guild is suing you for unlawful monopolization of storm whispering techniques. Tell them to sue Earth's Weather Service. We've been doing this for free for 150 years. The door slid open and Plix rolled in. Director Kovac, the first class of alien storm responders is ready for training. Right. She'd agreed to train other species in basic atmospheric crisis management. The training room was full of nervous-looking aliens, all regarding Delia with expressions ranging from reverence to terror. Okay, Delia said, pulling up a holographic display. This is what we call a thunderstorm. On Earth, we consider this mild weather. Today, we're going to discuss why running away screaming is not an appropriate first response. Instructor Kelvoth was in the front row, reassigned as her deputy director. He hated it. Delia found this deeply satisfying. The key to managing storm beasts is understanding that they're not malicious. They're atmospheric phenomena that happen to be alive. They follow patterns. They respond to environmental conditions. They can be predicted, tracked, and sometimes guided. You just have to. Her communicator chimed with an emergency alert. Everyone froze. Delia read the notification, then read it again, then sighed. Problem? Kelvoth asked nervously. Class 12 storm detected forming near the galactic core. Theoretical maximum intensity. Never been observed before. Heading toward inhabited systems. The room erupted in panic. Class 12! Nothing can survive Class 12. We're all going to die. Delia waited for the noise to die down, then looked at her class of terrified aliens with the expression of someone who'd just been told she needed to work overtime during budget review season. Right, she said. Change of lesson plan. Today we're discussing emergency response protocols for unprecedented atmospheric events. Kelvoth, prep a shuttle. Plix, pull up everything we have on Class 12 theoretical models. The rest of you, start working on evacuation trajectories for the Proxima colonies. You're going to walk into a Class 12 storm? Someone whispered, horrified. Well, I'm not going to run into it. That would be dangerous. Delia grabbed her go-bag from under her desk and headed for the door. Class dismissed. Read chapters 12 through 15 for next session. If we're all still alive. As she walked down the corridor, Kelvoth skittered after her. Director Kovac, a Class 12 storm is probably angry, definitely huge, and almost certainly going to make my annual report very complicated. Yeah, I know. She turned to look at him. You coming or staying here? Kelvoth's antennae twitched. Then, with visible reluctance, he fell into step beside her. Someone has to document your inevitable death for the historical records. That's the spirit. Delia walked toward the hangar bay, mentally reviewing what she knew about Class 12 theoretical models, not much, and what supplies she'd need, probably more flares, and thinking about how her job had evolved from study interesting storms to prevent galactic apocalypse on a regular basis. She really should have asked for more hazard pay. Behind her, alarms were starting to sound. Ahead of her, a Class 12 storm was probably doing something cosmically terrifying. Around her, the galaxy was panicking about atmospheric phenomena that Earth had been dealing with since before humans invented writing. Just another day at the office. "Hey, Kelvoth," she called over her shoulder. "Yes, Director? You ever heard the humans saying into the storm?" "No." Delia grinned. "You're about to learn."